What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Heard Tell Show. Time to talk economics again. When we do this, we have a little rotation of knowledgeable folks we turn to. This is one of them. I was going to tease it like he ain't, but he is. Jericho Hill, our friend, Ordinary Times contributor. He works at one of them ABC organizations for the government, but his opinions are his and his alone for the purposes of this talk. He also talks a little home equity and home buying and affordable housing. We're going to get into that too. But first, my friend Jericho, we have yet another economics report, and we have the schizophrenia again. We got great job numbers and bad inflation numbers. Please make sense of this for us.
All right. So first thing, I know it's in the vogue because three-letter agencies are apparently bad things. I don't work for an ABC agency. I work for an ABCD agency. So I'm exempt from all these comments.
And I saw your tweet about that, and that's why I said that, because I was hoping to tee you up for it, because you sent out a tweet like, I work for a four-letter agency, and I'm like, hey, this family-friendly show. But but
so we're going to get into this. So the big number one, we all can see that the unemployment numbers have been really good. Like the unemployment's quite low. We still have some long-term unemployed in this country. Some folks are simply not going to come back to the labor force, but in general, you look at the unemployment picture, and if you didn't know anything else that was going on, you'd think, wow, that's actually pretty good unemployment numbers. And that's in the aggregate. Aggregate hides things, but we'll just leave it at that. So let's get into the inflation number that popped. Folks reacted. It was 7.5%. That's an annual rate. That means from January 2021 to January 2022, prices in the basket that the BLS studies went up 7.5%. Okay. So it's a big number. We see folks on both sides of the political spectrum trying to use this for their particular policy endeavors. It's not really as big a number as you might think, because it's very context specific to your family's particular situation. So what I mean by that is the biggest drivers, if you look at of the last 12 months, the biggest drivers of inflation has been in energy. Energy prices over the last 12 months have gone up by about 27 percentage points. All other goods, we talking food, other things like that, health, those are averaging about 5%. That is a high number, right? Generally speaking, that's a pretty high number in a normal time. So I don't want to discount it. I don't want to say there's no inflation. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is we look at this, it's largely driven by energy. And digging into the numbers a little bit further, it's gas prices are up 40% year over year. Fuel oil, that's the electricity and gas and everything that you use in your home, that's up 46 percentage points. Piped gas is up 24 percentage points. Oh, and used cars are up 41 percentage points. So we also know that like home prices are up, that shelter costs are up a bit, but your mileage may vary. But if you own your own house, which 65% of Americans do, your cost of your house hasn't really changed in terms of your mortgage, because your mortgage has stayed the same because nobody's on an adjustable rate mortgage anymore. If you haven't bought a used car in the last year, you really haven't noticed that price. New car prices, by the way, are up 12 percentage points. Again, that is high, but that compared to 40% like that's quite a difference. And then if you happen to be someone like me who hasn't driven very much because you've been teleworking this whole commute, I actually looked at my odometer. I bought my car about a year ago. I've got less than 5,000 miles on it. I haven't really noticed what gas prices are. I think they're 3 something.
Yeah,
so
they're up
the point
there.
is, you're going to, like what I experience, is not what other folks experience, but like the salience of price rises, it's going to hit a particular demographic. Those are going to be your renters and your lower incomes and people that are dependent upon driving to work every day because guess what? They don't have a cushy telework job.
Yeah, and the problem is the things you're talking about, used cars, electric prices, the service industry workers, the lower end wage workers, the people that really took a beating the last 2 years. Those are probably, if you take the 5 or 6 most expensive things they spend money on other than where they live, it's their car, it's their fuel costs, it's their electric bill. These are numbers, and we're talking about them as reports, but to certain demographics, and the lower down the economic structure you go, the bigger an issue this is. This is some real world impactful stuff that's really, really hitting people hard right now.
Yeah, absolutely, especially at the lower end. And I mean, look, let's be honest. Why are we seeing a lot of energy and focus on this? We're 8 months away from a big election again, midterms. So the pressure's on to bring down the inflation. Now, I'm in the camp that I think that if we're looking at the changes. So, for instance, the month over month change, which in October was 0.9 percentage points. That's not annualized. That's just the month to month change. In November, it was 0.7. In December, it was 0.6. And January, it's 0.6. That's telling me that sort of we're over the wave of inflation continuing to increase and increase and increase. And so I would expect this wave, if current conditions hold, that's a big if, to start cresting down. Now, the Federal Reserve is going to help matters quite a bit. I'm a little bit more bullish on what the Federal Reserve is going to do come February or March. Keep in mind, the Federal Reserve can raise their rate in between meetings. I'm either anticipating a mid-meeting raise of 25 basis points or a March raise of 50 basis points. But I'm leaning towards they're going to do a mid-meeting raise pretty soon. Now, again, I'm not a monetary policy economist. I'm kind of spitballing here. But I think these numbers are enough to tell them, and then I bet they're getting some pressure that they got to start reining in the inflation right now. And so the way the Federal Reserve does that is they jack their federal funds rate up.
Yeah, we're talking to Jericho Hill. All right, but explain that to me like I'm 5, because we've been talking about inflation so much. I think people maybe just kind of gloss their eyes over, or it's become a buzzword. If the Fed raises interest rates, which everybody thinks they're going to do, it's just a matter of when and how much and how often. A lot of reports say they think maybe 3 raises over the next year or so is what they're looking at trying to do here.
I'm definitely above that.
Yeah, I think that's I think they may do 3 by the end of the summer, but let's not get into that right now. Explain it to me like I'm 5, though. What does it mean that they have to raise interest rates to curb in inflation? Because these interest rates, we were talking about fuel prices, gas prices, you start jerking around interest rates, that has a massive effect. And again, it's a proportionate effect the further down the economic structure you go, because people with loans, people with savings accounts, this is going to change a lot of stuff for a lot of people in a hurry if that number starts moving.
Sure. So first off, on the number of raises, I'm going to quote Big E, and I'm going to say 3 ain't enough. I need 5. And that's a little wrestling reference for everybody. Number 2, let's go back to the inflation story real quick. I said the driver, a good bit of this has been fuel prices, gasoline, oil, right? Our ability to influence oil prices is not so great. That's really a worldwide issue. Like everybody's dealing with that. Every developed country has skyrocketing inflation right now. And oil is probably one of these classic supply chain issues. What can we do about that? Not much. Well, let's pivot to what can the Fed do, right? The Fed can raise with its Fed funds rate, which is sort of a rate of that determines sort of interbank borrowing and stuff like that. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too much, but it has indirect impacts on the economy. But generally, what raising that rate does is it tends to slow down economic activity. Economic activity being a little bit slower, sort of, I guess, would mean, less price rises, less changes going on. So it's sort of like hitting a gas brake, hitting the brakes on the economy. And they're trying to do it in such a way that they're trying to sort of glide in, like I'm sure you've done this a number of times. The light turns red and you're not quite at that light yet. And you just sort of like slow down for a little bit instead of just stopping because you hate stopping and wait for the light to turn green. Then you can rev it back up again, right? So you never actually stop. I think that's what the Fed's going to try to do. That's how I would explain what goes on when they raise these rates at a explain it like on 5 level. They're just trying to hit the brakes just a little bit, slow things down, let things catch up.
Yeah, we're talking to Jericho Hill, a little economics today. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more economics, finish off our discussion about the CPI report. We're going to get into a little bit of affordable housing. That was all over the news last few days, so we'll talk about that. More with Jericho Hill on Her Tell right after this. Welcome back to Her Tell. I'm Andrew Donaldson. I'm joined with Jericho Hill, our economist buddy, who explains the economic numbers that have been confusing everybody, especially people like me. So thank you, Jericho, for being with us again. All right. You talked about the CPI report. Everybody was kind of freaking out at that 7+ number for inflation. But there was other good economic news. The last job reports number was probably beyond the administration's wildest dreams for a number they could put out on a press release. Very good number, very good news, correct?
Well, that's an interesting way to tee in. He is a good friend of mine, and he has dived into this job market report. And what he actually found is that, yes, on the surface, it looks like a great job report. But underneath, what we see is that a lot of the growth that we saw, and when we see in the job report, we see that Omicron really did a number of jobs for a while because it shut things back down. But a lot of the growth is due to, methodological changes, which are not nefarious. It's just you change a data source, right? Or you change over from moving from one year to another, and there's just squirrely things that happen with the data. Actually, I come out thinking that, it looked like a good jobs report, but it probably is a good jobs report. I want to be clear, but it wasn't as good as it looks like because of some of these little quirks and how the data is collected, and how the data gets reported. And there's nothing nefarious about that. It's just, everybody's got their cycle. We do this in this month, and we do this change in this month, and that's just sort of what happens.
I also found when he came out with that report, and his Substack's excellent, by the way, go subscribe for it.
Yeah, seriously, this is the guy that I'm encouraging to go get a PhD because I'm not somebody that has a PhD sort of like you got to have that to be a good economist. I'm not somebody that professes that everybody with a PhD is expert and whatnot. But unfortunately, in the econ world, having a PhD is sort of the gateway in. I think he's doing great work, but I want him to be listened to more. Yeah,
I highly recommend it. And when I read it,
I hope he does. Yeah.
And when I read it, the thing that jumped out to me was his whole premise. And this is a long post. This is an in-depth post he did on this. He said, and he called it, he said, this is the most complicated job reports we've ever had. And that really speaks to kind of the, this third or fourth time you've been on here and we've talked about it is, this is a really complicated economic time where we joke about the numbers not making sense and there being contradictory information, but this really is one of the more complicated and interesting economic times we've had in recent memory, isn't it?
Yes, that fake Chinese curse proverb, but you live in interesting times. So yeah, it's happened here. Look, we artificially shut down our economy, and most countries did artificially shut down their economy for a little while. That's unusual. We then had rapid stimulus activity and did a lot to sort of make sure that folks were okay because we shut down the economy. And that shutdown was going to happen whether the government did it or not. People were going to react, because, hey, pandemic, it's scary, And now we're coming back and we're seeing, what's happening. And look, people are moving to a much greater degree than we thought. You've got white collar workers doing remote work and choosing to relocate. Just look at what's happened out in Boise with 30% year-over-year house price increases. That's crazy. Um, we've got workers at the upper end of the age spectrum, simply like, I'm not coming back to work. They've dropped out. People are changing jobs, especially amongst the beleaguered retail sector and healthcare sector. Sort of sick of how people have been treating them, and because there are a dearth of workers sort of out there, they're seeing their sort of ability to get concessions and raise their wages to be really improved. Another thing that's happened is we basically shut down immigration in this country for 2 years because of the pandemic restrictions. So we haven't had those folks coming in. So that's also decreased our labor supply. Yeah, how do we get, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot that's changed in these 2 years. And the amazing thing is, this really wasn't anything that we anticipated. There's going to be a lot of research papers coming out in the next 5 to 10 years from economists, looking at this as what we call like a natural experiment. Like normally, like if we want to do an experiment, we have to go into a lab setting, or we have to do very complicated math to figure out what caused what. In this case, this pandemic, right? Out of our control. It happened. It changed things, and then we'll be studying the reactions to this for a very long time.
Yeah, talking to Jericho Hill, our economist friend, he likes to talk about affordable housing, though. So, but when the time we got left, I want to ask you about this. Let's just talk about it big picture, though, because part of the problem with the affordable housing debate is, especially if you're very online, there's just the very wonky, policy-heavy camp of it. And then there's what I call the meme camp of it, where they just take pictures of stuff and go, oh, look at these horrible, evil pictures and look at this picture. And I don't think either one of those are particularly helpful to the overall discussion. I understand it's a complicated policy issue. Is there a better way to discuss this? Because things like affordable housing is a really important issue. But it seems to me, because I'm just a layperson, it seems to me like we don't have a good way to actually discuss this in a way that would bring in people that aren't just into it as a niche figure or that it directly affects. Can we talk about this in a better way, do you think?
So one of the ways that I try to talk to people when I do sort of my advocacy work here in the DC region is, we talk about that you can build, for instance, just an example, but like you can build a duplex that looks like a single family house. And so for folks that are concerned that the appearance of their neighborhood is going to dramatically change, and that's going to affect their property values, the truth is no, you can densify housing without actually changing the fundamental appearance of housing in a neighborhood. The other thing that I sort of talk about is you have folks that get afraid, and rightly so, about how changes, because the change is very local, and folks like me come in from 40 miles away to say, oh, it's fine. I think maybe that there's, and some of our community organizations try to do this, a dialogue between those who are going to be most directly affected and sort of what the community at large and what the goals and objectives are trying to be and why this makes sense. But I mean, treat them as human, like I don't try to say that NIMBYs are all bad people. I don't think that they are, I think that one, they're responding to the incentives that we have as a society. And generally also as a society, we're a little bit hesitant to change. And they have concerns. They're concerned about what is density going to do? Is there going to be too many cars? And as an economist that works on this, we have ways to design cities and redesign them such that, that concern can be alleviated. We get concerns here in Alexandria about how does increased density affect flooding, and how does that affect our stormwater drains? Because Alexandria floods, and that's, if you're a property owner in Old Town Alexandria dealing with that flooding issue, yeah, you'd be concerned about more density, creating, more floodable opportunities. But again, there are ways we can design our buildings and design our streets and design our sidewalks that can help mitigate, those effects. And so I think that we get wrapped up a little bit in, change is going to happen, and we might spring it on folks. Whereas if we had a process where we sort of spent more time describing what's going to happen and spent more time helping folks understand, like, yes, we understand that you're going to your fear about flooding issues, but here's what we're doing. Here's A, B, and C, and these mitigate any increased flood risk, so your flood risk is not changing. People are going to have to observe that what the policymakers are saying holds, and maybe that engenders a little bit of trust.
Yeah, talking to Jericho Hill. This is an unfair question to end on, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm curious and I just want to know the answer to it. We went through the housing crisis of the late aughts, 08, 09. That was a predatory lending crisis as much as a housing crisis, but it affected housing, so we call it a housing crisis. Is there just been a paradigm shift when it comes to homes and home ownership where it's so much more debt heavy and mortgage heavy than equity heavy? Is that just a paradigm shift nobody ever stopped and kind of considered?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, it used to be you bought your home, you sold your home, and if you wanted a bigger home, then you sold the home you had and you move up. Now, with the way mortgages are set up and you have much more high-risk mortgages and stuff, it's way more debt burdensome. And it seems to me once you put things like predatory lending and some of the regulatory stuff and those sorts of things on it, that's a big change in how people try to move up in the world. And it's a lot more pitfall. It has a lot more pitfalls in it than the old way of doing it. I'm not saying you can ever go back to the old way because you can't, but I don't think we ever stopped and considered that that's a big shift in how people do things.
So the first thing that I would say is, one, there's not a lot of predatory lending. When what you're talking about, a classic example from the 06, 08 is what we call ninja loans. No job, no income, no assets. Those kinds of loans, the adjustable rate mortgages, they're not necessarily predatory lending, but they can catch people's, catch people by surprise with adjustments. Those sorts of features, they're gone from the market. The average credit score of a mortgage borrower in this country is exceedingly high today compared to what it looked like before the housing crisis of the noughts. We haven't seen rapidly deteriorating credit quality as well. It stayed very high. In fact, in major metropolitan areas, a lot of the homes that are bought and sold don't qualify for a traditional conventional mortgage because their loan amount's too big. They call jumbo loans. We've actually seen these jumbo loans, which used to be riskier mortgages, because these jumbo loans have other sort of requirements. They're now actually at par or less risky than your standard conventional mortgage. So it's a housing market, where I would say now the risk pool is pretty minimal when we look at the borrowers. The biggest risk in the housing market, and why some of my housing market colleagues describe it as the most unhealthiest housing market that we've seen in a long time, is generally speaking, inventory, which is the number of homes on the market, is about 4 months. And that's a sign of a good market. You have enough homes on the market so people can make good decisions and good choices and match appropriately, but homes don't really, come off the market the next day. Homes are coming off the market the next day. Inventory is down to below 2 months across the U.S. That's not healthy. Now, to get back at your point about what we're doing with equities and whatnot, I still think it's there for folks to build equity in homes and then sell and then move up to the next home. One of the things that changed, Andrew, after the Great Recession, and you did sort of highlight this, is that we went from having a surplus of homes being built to demand for homes needing to be built to having a dearth. So we basically were not creating housing supply to keep pace with demand after the 2008 crisis. So that means, functionally, that folks can't move into their next home. Folks can't use the equity from their home to buy up and buy a bigger house or move further out or do whatever it is, because there's not enough homes out there. There's not enough entry-level homes being built for folks to go from renting to owning in some respects. So I think that's a big challenge for the housing market going forward. And unfortunately, that's a challenge that, one, is a local solution, not a national solution, because it requires local zoning laws to change. And it requires the construction industry to be able to build homes. And it does not take a short period of time to build a home. It takes a very long time. It takes a year, 2 years for the whole permitting process all the way through.
Yeah, and we use people don't realize one of the reasons they use homes for an economic indicator is, I forget the number, it's something like 25, 26 different trades have to go into building one home. There's so much other stuff that goes into building a home. That's why they use it as an indicator. Jericho Hill.
Very good point.
Yeah, Jericho Hill. This is why we talk to you, because we always run out of time compared to the amount of material to get through. That's why we keep bringing you back, and we will have you again. Let folks know where they can find you on the Twitter and where you've been writing and what you've been doing, so that they can follow you between your appearances here on Hurtel.
Well, you can find me as Moto Economist on Twitter. I have a Substack called Quiglian, which is just, you give me the address is jerichohill.substack.com. That I do once a month. I post up some housing stats. I pull it from Zillow, from Redfin, from Mortgage Bankers Association. It's just kind of letting people know at a quick glance, if you're not a housing economist, where we're going and what the findings are. And I guess over the next month, what am I going to be doing? A whole lot of sitting here at home.
Well, you do it so well.
And maybe I should say, go Joe Burrow.
See,
I'm pulling for you.
It's bad enough we had Swift on the other day, who's Captain Ohio everything, and he's a Browns fan, and even he was all about the Bengals. I told him the same. It's a hard team not to like. Like, just everything about them. They play fast. They play joyfully. I think the Rams are probably going to beat them because they're just a vast. The Rams' strong suit is their defensive line, and the Bengals' weakness is their offensive line. That usually doesn't bode well for a football team, but we'll see what happens. Burrow's fantastic, but it's a hard team not to like. I'm with you. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they've just had such a long time from them not being in the Super Bowl that, I'm quite excited to see them, getting the shot.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember last time they were. Barely. Jericho Hill, thank you for the time today, buddy. I appreciate your time, my friend.
Take care, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you.